We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Friday, July 3rd here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Kyun.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're coming in. Also, Moonju's with us.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, and both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we've reached the end of the work week finally, so let's turn to a growing trend that's sparking plenty of debate among younger generations. The term itself may sound a bit unfamiliar, but it is getting traction both online and offline. So to start us off, first, what exactly is a full-time child, Kyun?
That's a very good question. The term full-time child can be directly compared with full-time homemaker or stay-at-home mom/dad. It's the same concept of a homemaker just applied to children. Now, it describes a situation in which an adult child lives with their parents, performs household duties such as housework, caregiving, or even cooking for their parents, while receiving a form of financial support in return. Now, against this backdrop lies structural issues with youth unemployment issues, housing difficulties, and of course, the high cost of living that everyone is actually suffering right now all over the world.
So it's not simply about living with your parents. What's interesting about this is that the term refers to adult children who do receive financial support from their parents while contributing to the household in return. And this isn't just a passing online buzzword. So can you tell us where this trend comes from, where this word comes from?
Yeah, of course. So this word originated in China in 2023 amidst record high youth unemployment in China. And this term is now emerging as a notable social phenomenon also here in South Korea. This is highlighted by recent book publications and widespread social media coverage. As a result, it became a broader social phenomenon. Like the traditional kangaroo generation, these young adults continue to rely on their parents for housing and financial support. However, what sets them apart from kangaroo's generation is that their active role in household chores and caregiving responsibilities. In return for doing housework, children receive certain amount of money from their parents. As the job market remains challenging these days, we're seeing an increasing number of full-time children.
So that is quite an interesting distinction to give full-time children some credit. Although both may rely on their parents financially, full-time children are expected to contribute through household and caregiving, giving the trend a bit of a different dynamic. And so it's time for our weekly debate. So today we're looking at the rise of the full-time child and asking whether it's a practical lifestyle choice or a step in the wrong direction. And before we hear your opinions, let's first look at how society is responding to this growing trend. So then why are opinions on full-time children so divided online these days?
Oh, yeah, there are some positive parts and the negative parts, but many people view full-time child in a positive light also. So with South Korea facing growing concerns over socially isolated young people and those who are out of work, so-called resting youth, many see them helping with housework and caring for parents as a more meaningful alternative than doing nothing in their home. So they also see it as a practical and often inevitable phenomenon. With jobs hard to find and housing costs remaining so high, many young adults have few realistic options these days. Not only is the number of resting youth is increasing, even those who have secured a job often hesitate to move out from their parents' house because of soaring rents these days. So if they have no choice but to just live with their parents and rely on their support, it makes sense for them to help ease their parents' burden by contributing through housework and caregiving. There is also growing support for multi-generational living, with more people seeing it as a way for families to support one another.
I think because a lot of relatives are also it's an aging society, so I think for them it might be good to have children there, to take care of them.
Yeah, there might be great help. We're going to talk later, but digital aid, their parents kind of have a hard time getting adjusted to
Right.
IT technology. They could be a help.
Right, there's so many different ways it could be helpful. What are your thoughts on this, Kyun?
On the other hand, there are also many negative views on this social trend. Many argue that because the so-called full-time child ultimately depends on financial support only from their parents, it's merely seen as a temporary escape from the immediate reality. They say problems are bound to arise if the parents become ill or even retire, not able to support them financially. So I think it's only a matter of time before things, I guess, just collapse and the children won't be able to receive funding from their parents. Now, some also say that the new term is simply a way of dressing up unemployment and to water down discrimination against people in this particular group, because some people might think, oh, they're choosing not to just work because they have the parents, I guess, support. But I don't know. Look, we have differing views, but it could be seen as something that's just to cover up unemployment issues. But we have to look deeper into it because it's not out of choice. There were actually, if we have to look at the whole environment right now, unemployment issues, we don't have, there's job security issues as well, and housing, rising housing costs, all these issues, they come together. And for people who are in their 20s or 30s, who are living with their parents, I'm sure they want to move out eventually, live their own lives, get married, start their own family. But because of these serious issues right now, they're falling back, and we definitely need to support them. And this could be us in the future. Who knows? So I think this is something we really need to put serious consideration.
I was thinking about what Munji said. I was thinking how this is kind of a nice thing because aging parents do need help. But you mentioned how it might not be a long-term solution. And it's also, I realized that it's not a solution that's readily available for everyone. Not all parents can support their adult children financially. So
I think it depends on what kind of situation you're in. Like you said, not every parent can support their children, and vice versa. Not all children can actually support their parents. So if they fall in that particular category, yes, but then it doesn't apply to everyone.
Right. So it really does highlight the dilemma facing so many young adults today. For some, it's a practical way for families to support one another during difficult times. For others, it's a model that could make long-term independence even harder to achieve. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers what they thought about this. So we ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking, what do you think about full-time children or stay-at-home adult children? And here's what the results showed. So the results show that opinions actually lean more positive than negative, with 61% saying they view the trend positively, while 39% say they have a negative view. So those results suggest that public opinion may be shifting, and more people seem willing to see this as a practical response to today's economic realities rather than simply a personal choice, which I personally was a bit surprised at the results. So can being a full-time child, would you really be considered a job in your opinion?
Yeah, sorry. Again, 61%, it was kind of interesting to see.
Right.
And, if we are going to think about if this is really a job or no, we have to really think about what's the definition of the job at the first place. So that definition isn't just about the dictionary definition, but we have to think about how people perceive job socially. For instance, when we hear the term full-time child, we can compare it to a full-time housewife, for example. And a full-time housewife may not earn an income physically, but we still generally recognize it as a form of work, right? So if that's the case, the same could apply to a full-time child as long as they're taking on responsibilities like housework or caregiving. In fact, statistically, taking care of their parents would save about $97 per day, and if you convert it into a monthly salary, it's $2,900 per month. Hiring outside caregiver, meaning that you have to pay about $3,000 for hiring outside caregiver, and if a full-time child is doing it for their elderly parents, they could save those $3,000. And average monthly salary in South Korea is about $2,350, which is economically, when we think about it, full-time child could be a job in some perspective, I think, because you're saving a certain amount of money. Yeah.
And it sounds like it's economically quite reasonable.
Yeah.
I will have to remember those numbers when I go back home.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
Like I mentioned before, this particular type of job is not sustainable, and it only functions as only like a temporary safety net, making it difficult to regard it as a real full-time job. It's a completely different situation from working under a company or even a small store in your neighborhood where legal contracts are signed that protects both the employer and the employee in terms of hours worked, the hourly rate, working environment, all these like different legal issues. But then applying that among family members seems to me honestly a little odd and I guess unnatural because we were never in this kind of relationship among family members. And I think in the long run, it can actually break the unconditional love that we naturally build between parents and children now. And I think, moreover, when they later try to find other work, I mean, can they really write this in their resume? Oh, what kind of work experience do you have?
Probably
I used to
not,
take care of
right.
my parents. I used to clean the house. I'm like, that's not a professional work experience. So we have these kind of issues arising. And I remember like growing up, I used to receive pocket money for doing housework, like throwing away the trash. I mean, mom would give me a few dollars and it was kind of like a source of motivation for me to do extra housework. But then if you put this into a different perspective, saying, "Oh, I'm a full-time."
Like that's my job.
Yeah,
that's my purpose.
job. I mean, how many hours do you have to work? And will your parents really force you to work 9 to 6, just doing non-stop housework? Is that really possible? And I think it may work for some specific family structures, but I cannot really imagine myself, working at home, just doing housework all day, every day, because as much as I do a lot of housework, I would definitely want to receive more money for the amount of work I do, because once you actually start doing housework, it's a lot of work. And if that includes like taking care of your parents as well, that's another issue.
Yeah.
And even cooking. So if you sum all this money, like the amount of work you have to do in terms of money, if you calculate into money, I'm not quite sure if parents will be willing to pay that much money to their children, because parents can do a lot of housework themselves, and they can cook for themselves as well. So I guess it's an interesting topic, but something that is actually happening all around the world. Yeah.
And it brings back to your earlier point of how it becomes a very transactional relationship with your parents, which is.
Can you imagine that, like having that kind of relationship with your parents?
Yeah, you have to have that uncomfortable conversation where I feel like I'm actually doing more than I'm being paid for.
I should get paid more. Like, can you say that to your parents?
I don't know how the parents will react to this. But you're staying at my place.
Yeah.
So it just becomes
Get out.
it just becomes an uncomfortable cycle. So this really is an interesting comparison. On one hand, unpaid caregiving housework have long been recognized as valuable labor. On the other, many would argue that a job also needs to provide long-term financial independence and career stability. But whether it's a job or not actually isn't the only question. So this raises another important issue. So are full-time children a help to their parents, or in your opinion, are they a burden?
From the parents' perspective, I think it will become a burden. Like full-time child can inevitably become like burdensome, as the adult child has only shown that he or she has failed to achieve financial independence. Now, in Korea, we have a very high elderly poverty rate, and many older adults are not adequately prepared for life after retirement. Now, we've talked about this many times on NewsGen. The retirement age in Korea is set at 60 years old, and the eligibility to receive pension fare is from 65. So they have that 5-year gap. So we are seeing many elderly Koreans already suffer financially, economically, because of the 5-year gap. And we're saying, we should raise the retirement age to 65 or even over. So because we have that problem arising, I mean, for them to actually support their children when they have difficulty supporting themselves, in the long run, I think it's going to become a bigger problem and a vicious cycle. Like I said, it's a very temporary kind of safety net to support their children, because you don't want to abandon your kids. They're your children. You have to nurture them until. How long is the big question? Like, what is the adequate age to take care of your children? For me, it's like once you hit, I guess, once you become an adult, you're free to leave the house, live your own life, support yourself. But in Korea, this doesn't seem like the case. Like they're staying with their parents as long as they can. So I don't know whether this works or not. It really, like I said, it really depends on the family structure. If the parents are able to afford it, go for it. If not, go seek a new job.
You know what? My heart really goes out to the boomers. I can see why they tend to complain. They have to take care of their parents, and now apparently their children as well for who knows for how long. So, what do you think about this? Are they a burden or a help?
Hearing what Gi-Hyun said, I think it's very tough question to answer. I think, and it's kind of different perspectives, they could be a help to parents. Indeed, there is actually a financial upside for parents because, meaning that they are a full-time children, that just means that they are not planning, at least in very shortly, to get married, right? But when you have children married, that means a big payout for weddings and housing. Not that parents should pay everything for their weddings and the housings, but just inevitably parents has to, or not has to, but normally they want to add some portion to their children's wedding or the housing amount. But full-time children don't require that. So that helps parents protect their retirement savings. In fact, Korean parents reportedly spend 55% of their retirement savings on their children's wedding costs.
Wow.
Full-time children also step in when parents fall ill. So caring for them directly, that also saves money, as I mentioned earlier. And for elderly parents struggling with digital devices, they often serve as a kind of in-house IT assistant, I guess. So from the parents' perspective, it's not everything's a positive, but there are some positive aspects that we could expect from full-time children, I think.
So they can save on wedding costs. It's like
Yeah.
they can avoid that earlier payout or continue to support their kids the rest of their lives. But I guess with the latter, you're saying at least the children will continue to be by their side, helping out with the little stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess it is interesting to look at it. So while financial independence really is important, sometimes support doesn't always come in the form of a paycheck, and of course not everyone sees it that way. So we also want to hear directly from our viewers on this as well. So we ran a poll on Nayeon's YouTube channel asking about this. So here's what the results said. So we'll look at the results right now. So 66% said they would be a help, while 34% felt they would be a burden. So that really is a decisive majority, and it suggests that many people see the value of contributing at home, even if that support doesn't always come in the form of a paycheck. So that naturally brings us to the role this time of the government in all of this. So should the government, Minju, support full-time children?
Again, this is a very hard question whether government should help them. But I do believe welfare policy also needs to be restructured to fit this kind of changing era, inevitable era. For example, when full-time children take on direct care of elderly parents, the government could offer support by providing a family caregiving allowance or social service vouchers, because at the end of the day, if they there are some part the government has to support when the elderly parents are taken care of by the country or the government. So full-time child are kind of removing the burden of that part from the government. So I think this could be one option. And another help would be country offsetting costs at a rate comparable to what hiring an outside caregiver would cost.
I think this could be a controversial topic and question. So what are your thoughts on these?
Many full-time children take on this role only temporarily while preparing for employment or, let's say, studying even more to acquire a more professional certification to become more competitive in the job market. However, if they receive financial support in this situation from the government, they may be more likely to settle into their current circumstances and not actually strive to move forward toward independence. Financial independence, that is. And so what the government can do is to help a full-time child become more self-reliant and encourage them to join the workforce outside the support and the care of one's parents. Now, receiving tax benefits is important, but I think paying tax is as important, especially if you fall in the working age population.
Right, so it is a difficult balance. Any policy response would need to recognize the value of caregiving while also making sure young adults are still encouraged to pursue long-term independence. And as we wrap up, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. So what changes are needed to better support young adults in your opinion, Kyun?
Change is inevitable, and for significant changes that society is going through at this current moment, that will affect, in the long run as well, affecting a large portion of a nation in a negative way, then I think structural changes need to be implemented right away by reforming laws or even enacting new ones sooner than later. So I think little ripples can actually turn into big waves that cannot be overturned. So making a step in the right direction right now, that may require some sacrifice from, I guess, anyone, any age group, is needed because, and it seems very practical for us to actually prevent bigger problems arising in the future, because for an economy to sustain, we have to think ahead into the future. It's not easy to do because right now what we're going through right now is the most important for us.
Right.
But then for our future generations and for the future of a country, we need to make immediate changes that will cause bigger problems in the future because we have seen through data. It's not if we're not heading in the right direction, we have to make immediate changes. And I think these are one of the changes that needs to be really looked into seriously so that we have a brighter future moving forward.
I think making sure caregiving isn't done free of cost is a good step in the right direction. But at the same time, like you said, looking at this long term, it might mean an increase in the resting population. We talked about resting youth before on the show too, and it is a problem. So it is good to look deep into this. So do you have anything to add to this, Minju?
Yeah, pretty much. I think I agree with Kiyun. We all know as time and era flows, we also have to change accordingly. One way could be the government supporting young generations, creating or career transition pathways. Just a quick fact check. The reason why this kind of full-time child could be possible these days is because, compared to our parents' generation, MZ generation, or 20s or 30s, those in 20s or 30s are earning less money, meaning that still parents' generations are available or at least affordable to kind of support their children. But at the end of the day, this kind of trend would pass away, and we're going to see a transition in this kind of trend, which means that at the end of the day, young children has to find a job, and the best way for the government to help them is just letting them know how they could work through those kind of pathways, right? So I think there need to be some changes, and we should change accordingly with the trend. Yeah,
I agree. So whether you see full-time children as a practical choice or a worrying trend, the debate ultimately reflects the realities facing many young adults today. As the job market, housing costs, and family structures continue to change, society may also need to rethink what independence looks like. And finding the right balance between support and self-reliance will likely remain an important challenge. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back on Monday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Q.
Always a pleasure.
And also Moonju.
Thanks for having me today.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. And if you're planning to become or stay a full-time child, remember weekends are still business hours. We are News Generation.